DFS community, welcome into the Week 7 edition of one of the most accurate DFS shows in the industry. This is episode number 69 of the Adjusted Line Play Report, where we take a deep dive into the trenches to determine game script and player outcomes. This show is presented by Zilla Fantasy Elite. I am your host, Todd Hoffman, and you can find myself over on Twitter at Todzilla1337. And you can find Zilla Fantasy Elite over on Twitter at Zilla Fantasy. All right, folks, recording this on Tuesday. I got some vacation lined up here, so gonna enjoy that through the rest of the weekend, actually. So recording this on Tuesday night. Already, if you are a Twitter follower, you can see all of these updates and the waiver wire suggestions. We're gonna go over Thursday Night Theory is going to be done on this video. And then we're going to get into the Island game because there's a London game. And then we're going to get into the main slate, which includes Sunday Night Football. And then we're going to hit up the 2 Monday night games as well. And we just got 2 teams on bye this week. So hitting it all up in one big video here. So we're going to dip into the Thursday Night Theory. Spend a little bit of extra time on the Thursday Night Football game for you to kind of teach you the ropes, or at least tell you what I see when I look at these matchups or what I'm looking at. And then we'll dive into the Sunday games, including that London game, which we will look at in an island aspect as well. What's an island game? Some people ask. That's simply when it's the only game of football being played at that particular time. So typically Thursday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, and Monday Night Football. Although this season we've had a lot of dual games going on in Monday Night Football, but really looking at those island games where that's the only matchup that anybody who wants to watch some NFL football, that's the only one that's on, that's an island game. So Thursday Night Football in London, definitely this week. Sunday Night Football will be the only one on at that time. Monday night's got 2 this week, but we will look at those a little bit more in depth versus what we're going to do for the main slate. So let's kick it off here. Get that money sign and the bars across the screen. And here we go. All right, Thursday Night Football. Denver heading into New Orleans. Denver's actually 2-point road favorites here heading into New Orleans. Vegas game total 37.5, which gives Denver a team implied total of 19.75 and New Orleans at 17.75. So typically when we look at the adjusted line play report, this is number one thing we look at. What is the betting market? Who is putting all of this money down, and what are they saying that they think is reality? Well, for them, they think 37.5 points is roughly about where they're going to score. It's not a very high total. You want something close to 50 in general for games to attack. For fantasy purposes, if you're doing start-sit decisions, those are good ones to attack and have players from, because in general, they're going to score a little bit more points. You start getting a little nervous when they start approaching the low 40s that it's not a very good environment. As we can see here, this is 37.5. So normally you don't want to focus on those, but this is an island game. So how do you approach a matchup like this if you're doing just like a captain spot? Well, typically if I see a low scoring one like this, I'm going to look at it and say, geez, it doesn't look like a whole lot of offense here. I probably don't want to load up my entire, if you're over on DraftKings, my entire 6 roster spots filled with offensive players, because they might not get a ton of work in there. When I see when I see scores this low, don't think there's going to be a lot of volume offensively. So I start looking at the defenses and the kicker as very viable options in these island game matchups. So keep that in mind as we go through these particular lineups. That's what we're kind of looking for in that context. I don't think there's going to be a ton of offense. We will look at it and determine kind of what we can glean from that. But that's kind of how we start our approach here. So let's get into it. And I'll zoom in here, provided I don't block some of the screen with my fat head here. Looks like I will. So I'm just going to zoom out. Actually, we can zoom in a little bit further and I'll just adjust the screen. So hopefully I'm not blocking much of it. Let's do a little of that. I should be off the screen here for you folks. So typically we look at the away team first. So we're going to look at that. We see Denver number 1 in offensive pass protection. New Orleans, number 22 in defensive pass rush. What is this number? This number is an adjusted sack rate. So Denver, number 1 in offensive pass protection. That's telling us they're not getting sacked very often. And if they are, it's probably in situations where it's a little bit more expected, like 3rd and 15 versus maybe 2nd down and 3, things like that. New Orleans at 22, that's out of 32 teams, so below average there. They're actually approaching red, which is the bottom 10 teams, so they're approaching a red there, but really, below average to poor there in the defensive pass rush, which means they're not generating a lot of sacks on offense. It doesn't mean that they're not getting pressure. It just means that they're not getting home and getting sacks on those particular cases. So this is telling me New Orleans, probably not a defense necessarily that's going to get a lot of sacks. If you're going to start them in your lineup, they better have some sort of turnover potential. Just keep that in mind. So Denver here gets the ball out quick. Bo Nix is very mobile. So that's why they're not taking a lot of sacks here, is he's just not getting sacked a bunch because he's mobile, and they try to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible there. So trying to do what they can to limit his ability to make mistakes and hold on to the ball and get sacked and throw bad things because there's people coming down his throat. So don't expect a lot of sacks here from New Orleans. That's the basis of the game, and if anything, they might have a little bit of extra time to throw the ball based off of what we see here from New Orleans. So we could see some Cortland Sutton seems to be the go-to guy in terms of the pass game, but he could have a little bit better game if they got some time to throw. Now the offensive pass DVOA and defensive pass DVOA, those are completely different numbers. So what do those mean? Well, you can think of DVOA. It stands for defensive adjusted value over average. So if you look at the entirety of the NFL and what happens on a particular play given the scenario. So it could be second quarter, 10 minutes left, you're on, X yard line. Let's say it's just the offensive, 43 yard line, or the opposing team's 42 yard line. Second quarter, it's 2nd down and 7. If you run a run play, this is the average thing that you can expect. If you run a pass play, this is the average that you can expect given the scenario that you're in. And if you do one of those plays, it's going to say, hey, based off of what an average outcome is for this scenario, you were either a little bit better or a little bit worse, or a lot better or a lot worse. Depending on that outcome, you basically go above or below that average. And we can see Denver offensive pass DVOA is in the red, number 26. So one of the worst offenses in the league, in the bottom 10 here in terms of offensive pass DVOA. So given the same situation and adjusted for the defense, so again, that D is defensive adjusted value over average. Given the defenses that they've played and how they've produced, they are one of the worst offenses in that regard in the pass game. And then we see the opposing defense is number 8. So that's a red-green matchup. These are always ones that I want to highlight, which means it's a significant favor for the one of the teams here. In this case, it's New Orleans defense, which tells me Denver is not going to be very effective moving the ball via the air in this. Even though they get the ball out quick and they may otherwise have a little bit of extra time, they're not going to be very effective compared to the average NFL team in those scenarios, which tells me they're not going to be very explosive, essentially. So don't expect any explosive plays. If they do, they're probably going to be dink and dunking their way down the pathway, I guess, down the field. So keep that in mind. Even though they have time, they might get the ball out quickly. They're not going to be very explosive. New Orleans should be able to prevent their pass game from being very effective. So that's how we attack the pass game. We'll get into the home team a little bit later, but first we'll get the away team and look at Denver's offensive run blocking here. So maybe I'll move myself over a little bit here so everybody can see this entire matchup. Actually, this might be a better view for everybody with me in the middle. So offensive run blocking, we have Denver at number 21, New Orleans at 30, and then offensive run DVOA. So run and pass DVOA are pretty much measured the same against an NFL average for the given situation. Down in distance, quarter, how far the spread is in the game at that particular time. In this one, we see DVOA, Denver 27, one of the worst offenses there as well, but New Orleans 26th in defensive run DVOA, so they've been one of the worst defenses, which tells me, hey, given this situation, we might see Denver a little bit better in the run game than they otherwise have been this season. And then especially when you look at the offensive run blocking. So they're also not very good there. They're 21st. It's below average. But then New Orleans at 30 in defensive run stopping. This run stopping and run blocking versus the DVOA calculated a little bit differently. We did the defensive value over average with the pass game and kind of how that works. With the run blocking, they're really looking at segments for runs. If it's a negative yardage for a run, very good for the defense, very bad for the offensive line. So that's kind of how that works. You know, if it's a 0 yard, it's another bucket, basically. Still bad for the offensive line, still good for the defensive line. 1 to 2 yarder or 1 to 3 yarder, you're looking at a little bit better than those other options for the offensive line, but still not great. And then, you know, a little bit worse for the defense, but still pretty good. Then you get into that 3 to 5 range bucket. A lot of runs fall in that 3 to 5 range bucket. So you're looking at that and, you know, 5 to 8 yards, 8 to 10, and then 10 and beyond. All those different levels, I don't exactly know what they are off the top of my head, but you can kind of imagine them in that bucket. A run that goes into one of those buckets is going to get attributed a particular value based off of its outcome, regardless, a little bit different than the defensive value adjusted over average. This is just kind of raw stuff. So this is telling me 21 versus 30. New Orleans, one of the worst in that category. So bottom 3 defense actually in terms of how often they're probably giving up positive yardage. So along with this offensive run DVOA being a little bit better probably than you would expect the Denver offense to be in this number, I would say you're going to see Javonte Williams have quite a few positive runs. You're going to probably see a lot of, you know, 3 to 6 yard runs in there with every once in a while a burst, you know, 10 to 15 yards in there. So based off of what I've seen from this pass attack in this run game, I'm telling you, Denver is going to have to move the ball on the ground in order to be effective. It looks like the run game's not going to be very good. Considering this run game and that New Orleans doesn't really get after the quarterback, you might see Nick's run a little bit less than he otherwise has. I don't know what his scramble rate is, but I'd expect that to drop in this situation. But they do get him out in the open. If the defense is otherwise lagging behind, doing whatever, he might take off, especially if they're covered. So that might wash itself out, but he's probably used to his receivers being covered anyway. So I'd expect him to run maybe a little bit less, lean a little bit more on this run game, especially if they, you know, Vegas is saying, hey, they're projected to win by 2 points. They're expected to be leading perhaps in this particular game, which is going to have them run the ball a little bit more. So expect that to kind of be the case for that particular team. So that's going to be Denver in this situation. Let's get down to New Orleans offense, and maybe I'll just dip back to this view so people can see all of the numbers on the screen. So defensive pass rush here, number 2, offensive pass protection, number 15, and then defensive pass rush, number 2. So Denver very good at getting after the quarterback, getting them out of the pocket. We do have 2 rookie quarterbacks here, so number 15 in offensive pass protection. I'd expect Spencer Rattler to be under a little bit of duress in this particular matchup. He is mobile. We saw him, I think, with 38 rushing yards last week. Expect a few more runs in this. Also, if they're under duress like this and they don't have a lot of time, I always expect them to have to get the ball out a little bit quicker. Obviously, you expect more sacks, you expect more, opportunities for a strip sack, fumble, recovery, things like that. You expect them to get rushed and throw a little bit more errant passes, which are interceptable. That's always on the table. But then you also get the aspect of if they're trying to get the ball out quick because the pressure's there, you're going to get more dump offs to the running backs. You're going to get shorter passes. And I'm not really sure with New Orleans with their injuries that they have. It sounds like Olave concussed. He's probably not going to get back for a Thursday night game. Denver's defense, actually, we have their shutdown corner also under concussion there. So I don't think he's going to play either, but still. Defensive pass rush, probably going to get home, pushing Spencer Rattler out of the pocket and needing to get the ball out quickly. It's going to go to the tight ends, and it's probably going to go to the running backs. whichever receiver. Bub Means is the only one that I can think of because it sounds like Rashid Shaheed also banged up. I'm not sure if he's going to play in this. Bub Means might be the only show in town for wide receivers at the moment. And then getting the dump offs to the tight ends and the running backs. So Taysom Hill, if he plays, I'd expect him to get pretty heavily involved in that aspect. I got Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau at tight end as well, so they could be getting a little bit more targets. But in all reality, a lot of their offense runs through Alvin Kamara. I just expect him to get some more dump-offs based off of the pressure that's going to be going on. And now in terms of pass DVOA, Denver number 7 and New Orleans number 23. We've seen that really shrink after those first 2 games. So one of the worst, bottom 10 here, 23rd in offensive pass DVOA, so pretty poor there. And then, so it's another red-green matchup, basically. So New Orleans, not going to be very good against that average, so they're probably not going to be very explosive, probably not going to get a ton of touchdowns and things like that, which would boost your DVOA on particular plays. So keep that in mind. I don't think New Orleans is going to have a very good time throwing the ball. It's going to be dink and dunk underneath and probably to Alvin Kamara a bunch. And then expect some scrambles there from Spencer Rattler. Now, the run game, it's actually a little bit more neutral here. So New Orleans, number 12 in offensive run blocking and number 12 in offensive run DVOA. And then Denver on defense, number 9 in defensive run stopping, number 12 in defensive run DVOA. So these are pretty even matchups. Furthest apart is 3. Consider that pretty close. And this is obviously exactly the same. In those scenarios, from what I have gathered in 4 years of doing this, typically it's just a standard day at the office. What really happens is in those scenarios, if you have a stud on offense, that's when they do well because everything is otherwise evenly matched and that stud is just better than the person across from them on the field. And they end up having the good day when it comes to that, especially if it's poor over here. So Alvin Kamara, you can probably consider him a stud in his prime. I don't know if he's there anymore at this stage of his career, but he's still really good. Similar to Denver, I think the offense is going to run through the running backs, so you're going to see some dump offs to Alvin Kamara. And when they're running the ball, they're probably going to be the most successful in this particular matchup. So expect heavy usage from Alvin Kamara. Now, that doesn't lend itself necessarily to a ton of points when the pass games aren't very effective and the run games are how they're going to be focused. So I would expect not a ton of points to be scored, similar to what Vegas is saying. I'd expect a lot of the offense to go through Javonte Williams and Alvin Kamara in this matchup. And then, getting down to the red zone, if they're going to get down there and we really see their offense is struggling, they're more likely to stall out, which means they're going to have field goal attempts, and this isn't a dome. So low score, you're probably going to want these 2 running backs. You're probably going to want 1 or 2 kickers, and maybe based off of this, you're going to want Denver's defense just because they're going to be able to get after Spencer Rattler. And, he's not probably as mobile as Bo Nix as we've seen him. Could take a few more sacks in this. It certainly looks like he'll be under a bit more pressure than Bo Nix in this particular matchup and more likely to lead to some of those turnovers. So Alvin Kamara, probably game script proof. Javonte Williams, if Denver is up, along with their defense, you get that correlation. So both running backs, Denver's defense, and a couple of kickers. You find some other guy like Bub Means or Cortland Sutton, you name it. I think that's going to be how you win this Thursday night game. One last aspect that we have on here is the pace of play. So really, we just like looking at the overall pace of play and the offensive neutral situation pace of play. And overall pace of play is just, hey, how many plays do they run per second? Denver is number 6 in the entire league. Now that number can be skewed by, hey, if they're always behind, they're trying to play a little bit faster to score points. That could be the case. Denver is not exactly a great offense in that regard, but let's see if I can move myself off the screen here. So number 6 in overall pace of play, pretty quick. Offensive neutral situation pace of play tries to take out that aspect if you're down a ton. So offensive neutral situation means first 3 quarters, anytime that the score is within 8 points, in the first 3 quarters and outside of the last 2 minutes of the second quarter. So they don't want to include the time when they're trying to get in before halftime and they're probably in hurry up mode trying to push the ball down the field. They take those plays out. So first, second, third quarter minus those last 2 minutes of the second quarter. As long as the game is within 8 points, that's where they consider, hey, the game's not out of control. It's really not affecting the play calling that much to speed up or slow down. In that situation, Denver is number 6. And then we have New Orleans, kind of middle of the pack, number 18 in overall pace of play, and number 14 in the neutral situation pace of play. They do play fast compared to the rest of the league when they're trailing by 7+, which they might be in this, which is another reason to get Denver's defense if Denver's leading and by 7 or more points. New Orleans might speed up their pace a little bit, and you're going to see more mistakes, more sack opportunities. When they lead, though, they get really slow. And then Denver, when it comes to them, they're still fast when it's a neutral situation, but then they're a little bit slow. I mean, top 12 when they're leading, but then 20th, I guess, rank when they're trailing by 7+. So it doesn't seem like they necessarily speed up at all when they're trailing. It kind of probably just run at an even keel pace there. So keep that in mind. That's how that works. So that's the Thursday night theory portion of this video. It's going to be a long video, but we're starting with that. Now we're going to get into the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the New England Patriots in London. All right, so let's get under the weekend games here. We have a London game, New England heading into Jacksonville in Tottenham, I believe, over in England. So we got a London game. Not a real home team here, but we do have Jacksonville actually as 5.5-point favorites in this matchup. It's a 42.5 Vegas game total. So again, that's pretty low in those scenarios. An island game where you start looking into, potentially defense and kickers being part of the top 6 fantasy scores or part of the optimal lineups. In this, Jacksonville 24 team implied total, New England 18.5. A little shocked at this line considering how well Drake May seemed to have played last week in Jacksonville's offensive woes. But let's get into the matchup here. Now that you're all fresh off of how to analyze these things, we're at New England offensive pass protection number 31, Jacksonville defensive pass rush number 28. In these scenarios, defensive pass DVOA 29, Jacksonville 32. I expect Jacksonville, who has otherwise been poor at passing. We saw a quarterback switch. We saw it pretty good there. So Drake May hit 250 some yards, I believe. Pretty solid for a rookie in his first matchup. It was an otherwise not great matchup against Houston. Their defense was pretty solid, and he came through. Now we get this comparative defense who's really bad. They've been absolutely torched by everybody in the air. Even Deshaun Watson had a quarterback 1 performance against this team. Despite not scoring a ton of points as an offense as a whole, he still ended up as a QB1 against this Jacksonville squad. So Drake May in this should be a little bit better than you would otherwise expect this New England offense to be. It seemed like Demario Douglas was the main target, but I also like Jalen Polk in this to get some run, and Hunter Henry as well seemed to get involved. So the pass game should be better than expected against this Jacksonville defense. Then the run blocking side, New England 17, DVOA 31, Jacksonville 12 and 16. Slight favor in the run stopping for Jacksonville, and then a big favor in the DVOA. So I wouldn't expect the run game to be super effective in this. We saw Ramondre Stevenson miss last week. I'm not entirely sure if he's going to make this trip or this game. I think he is otherwise expected to maybe come back this week. So keep an eye on that. That could change things. But otherwise, if he's out, Gibson's certainly a play. And he does get involved in the pass game when he's in there. And then on the Jacksonville side, they're number 18 in offensive pass protection and pass DVOA. New England 26th in pass rush and 27th in pass DVOA. This is telling me Jacksonville is going to also find the pass game a little bit easier than they're used to. They're a little bit below average, but they're facing a defense that is very below average, if not poor, in New England. So they're going to have time to throw, and they should be pretty explosive there. I don't know what Christian Gonzalez is doing, but he's kind of shutting down most people. He's probably going to be on Brian Thomas in this particular matchup. I think he's the one that they're going to want to put him on. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be there every play, but maybe if Christian Gonzalez is there, you temper your expectations a little bit for Brian Thomas Jr. You get a little bit more focused on Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram. We saw him be pretty good when he came back last week, getting a bunch of targets. So I'd expect this pass game to continue. You can expect Lawrence to have a decent game there. And then the run blocking side, Jacksonville number 10 in run blocking, New England 22. Pretty big favor there of Jacksonville, actually 23rd, starts turning it red, so almost a red green matchup there. And then run DVOA, Jacksonville a little bit below average at 19. New England, one of the worst at 27, so a bottom 6 team there. So it looks like Jacksonville will also be able to run the ball. We do have a hamstring injury for Travis Etienne. I don't think he plays in this particular matchup. Certainly looks like Jacksonville's offense should be in play. Their pass game should be very solid. Their run game should be very solid. I would expect Hank Bigsby in a matchup like this to do pretty well, especially if this pass game is being effective. This run game is just going to be all the better. And the interesting part is, even though New England a little bit poor in this particular scenario in running, their offense should be able to move the ball through the pass game, especially if Jacksonville is scoring points. You know, it's a road game where they have to travel, but this 42.5, to be honest, I might bet the over on that if I had the opportunity. I think Jacksonville can put up, 25 to 27 on their own. And I certainly think New England can get back to 21 to 24 in a particular matchup like this. The 5.5 line, I mean, it certainly looks good for Jacksonville to be scoring points and to, New England struggle a little bit in the run game there compared to Jacksonville. Could mean a few more field goal attempts there for the New England kicker as well, so keep that in mind. He's certainly in play. If you don't feel super comfortable with some of those New England options, you can certainly get the kicker, as I think he's going to have 2 to 4 field goal attempts in this particular matchup to score some points. And then an island game matchup that may just be enough to crack your top 6 and get all of the players that you're interested in getting. But expect Jacksonville offense to do well. Expect New England's pass offense to be better than expected as well. Pace, nothing to write home about in this particular matchup, but there's your London game, folks. Now we're going to get into the main slate. All right, number 1 game on the slate here. Carolina going into Washington. Washington 7.5 point home favorites. We see that big, fat, juicy 51.5. Excellent game total here, number 1 on the slate. With that 7.5 Vegas line, that gives Washington an extremely healthy 29.5 points as their team implied total. That is number 1 team implied total on the slate. Carolina down at 22 is the 15th best on this slate, and I believe that is out of 22 teams. So keep that in mind. Carolina side, offensive pass protection number 9. Offensive pass DVOA number 28. Washington matching them. They're number 6 in defensive pass rush and 29 in defensive pass DVOA. So what this tells me, Washington probably going to get some pressure on Carolina. But Carolina probably should be able to move the ball a little bit more effectively on offense than they otherwise have this season. This is really, really ripening for Andy Dalton and the Deontay Johnson connection here. Expect Carolina to be under pressure. Washington, they're number 9, so they're not taking a ton of sacks here, but Washington should be able to apply some pressure. They may be able to handle it, but they're going to have to get that ball out a little bit quicker in this game, and that matches Deontay Johnson's style pretty well. The other guy with Washington just getting obliterated by a lot of the wide receiver ones or outside wide receivers. You could sneakily look into Jalen Coker. He could be a sneaky DFS play this week. Just keep an eye out for him. Washington's defense has been bad, and he's been basically thrust into the number 3 role. He's overtaken last year's second-round pick, Jonathan Mingo. I think Coker, undrafted rookie this season, has overtaken him already on the depth chart, so keep an eye out for that. And if you haven't, try to put the link up here for his machine learning model video. We did see him in the top 10 in the year 3 for ceiling, which tells us, hey, this guy has something in his profile which the machine learning model likes and is giving him a ceiling, which could be good. And now we see the fruits of that outcome. So we got a lot of Jalen Coker for myself and my friends who pay attention to this stuff on their fantasy squads because, hey, They know who to look at for their underground stuff and to get the right information. And it's, well, I can't get myself all the way up there, but it's the Zilla Fantasy Elite. Subscribe if you haven't already. Anyway, moving on. Run blocking, Carolina number 5, Washington 27th in run stopping. And then the run DVOA, Carolina 17-21. I'd expect Chuba Hubbard to be very good in this. It does seem like the offense in general for Carolina should be able to move the ball pretty effectively, despite needing to get it out quickly here. I think they have the horses there on their offense to operate within this environment, and I think Chuba should have a pretty solid game here against Washington. So that's good news, right? That's why this Vegas game total perhaps is so high. Carolina versus Washington on the offensive side. So number 20 in offensive pass protection for Washington. Carolina 31, so second to the worst there. And then a major red-green matchup here. Washington number 4 in offensive pass DVOA. Carolina 31st in offensive pass DVOA. Washington should not only have a little bit more time than they're used to. They're a little bit below average here in pass protection. But they're probably going to be very explosive. They've already been very explosive. Now they're playing a defense who allows a bunch of explosive plays, in theory, or a bunch of plays that are far above the average for a typical outcome against their opposing offense. This is a match made in heaven. Should be very good for the pass game. Terry McLaurin's the biggest beneficiary there, but we also see him get out-targeted last week by Noah Brown. He's somebody that we put on the target for the waiver wire little blurb. So if you're following on Twitter, you probably saw that by the time you see this video. And he is certainly a DFS play if you need some cheap options on your slate. So good job here. And obviously Jaden Daniels in play with his legs, as well as this pass game just looks super juicy for him and McLaurin and probably Noah Brown. And then on the run blocking side, also good for Washington. Number 15, so middle of the pack there for offensive run blocking. Carolina 32nd in stopping the run. And then they're number 4 in offensive run DVOA. Carolina 32. I think a lot of this is maybe skewed by Jaden Daniels, but hey, a run is a run. Jaden Daniels should be explosive if he is running in this. And we should also see, I don't know what Brian Robinson's injury history is going to be by the time Sunday rolls around. But if he plays and he's not limited, he should be very effective in this. Otherwise, Austin Eckler will be a very good option as well. We saw him do very well last week in some limited opportunities. So expect that to continue. In terms of pace of play, Carolina and Washington actually pretty slow in terms of neutral situation. Carolina is number 5 in overall, but that's because they've been trailing a bunch and trying to be a little bit quicker. I'm probably going to be trailing in this game too, based off of what I see. And again, I think this is a pretty good line, 7.5 points. Vegas game total 51.5. I certainly agree that it could be there. Don't know what the weather's going to look like on Sunday in Washington. Always watch out for that. A little bit worse conditions could bring that Vegas game total down, but I actually like that line. Usually when it's that high, I can find faults. This one, not so much. So, very interesting game one, and certainly seems well worthy of being the number 1 game on the slate. All right, next game on the slate here is Seattle heading into the Dome of Atlanta. This is a 51 Vegas game total, so very good. Number 2 on the slate here. We have a 3-point home favorite for Atlanta, which I found a little surprising, but yeah, 3-point home favorite for Atlanta. Says these two teams are even. They're just getting the standard home game bump there of 3 points. So with that 51 Vegas game total, that gives Atlanta a 27-point team implied total and Seattle a 24 team implied total. Getting on to the Seattle side, they're number 16 in offensive pass protection versus Atlanta's dead last 32nd offensive pass rush. So don't expect a ton of pressure on Geno Smith, or at least not taking sacks. He should have more time than usual to throw in this. Very good for DK Metcalf and Lockett. That's typically who benefits in these scenarios. Jackson Smith and Jigba, probably one of those that you're going to want to avoid this week, even though it may seem on paper like a better matchup. Seattle's offensive pass DVOA is 11, Atlanta 21. Again, in the favor here of Seattle, so expect the pass game to be very effective. Geno Smith, certainly an option based off of this in DFS. Getting into the run blocking, Seattle number 25 in offensive run blocking, Atlanta 17. So Seattle sees quite a few negative plays from the looks of it there. Atlanta kind of middle of the pack, so They might find it a little bit easier to get some positive yardage against this Atlanta front, but the DVOA aspect, they do certainly end up producing quite a bit compared to the defensive adjusted value over average. So Seattle a little bit better than expected against some of their defenses, which could mean they end up with a little bit more explosive plays. And we know that Kenneth Walker is kind of that, hey, boom bust. We see him with a lot of negative plays, but then we also see him with a lot of 10-plus yard carries. So could be one of those games here against Atlanta where he doesn't have a ton of those because they're kind of middle of the pack in that defense, but he ends up being very explosive. So expect Seattle to pass the ball well, and run game, a little bit more volatile where they may be very explosive but have a few more, negative runs or 2 or less yards on their runs. Atlanta side, number 7 in offensive pass protection and offensive pass DVOA. Seattle, number 7 in defensive pass rush and number 17 in defensive pass DVOA. So expect Seattle to be able to get after the quarterback a little bit. Atlanta has been good in terms of not taking sacks, but should be under a little bit of extra pressure in this, which means they're going to need to get the ball out a little bit quicker here in Atlanta. Typically when that's the case, it leads to dump-offs, tight end targets, or to the slot receiver, the guys running underneath routes. I don't really know off the top of my head how Atlanta's pass game is operating. I'm assuming from the very little that I have actually seen, the more intermediate or underneath stuff is going to Ray McCloud. He might be more of the quick burst stuff, but we do see Mooney. He does run some deeper stuff, but he is also an intermediate target, so I think he's certainly capable of earning his share of targets in this. And then Drake London does seem to be the focal point of the pass game in terms of targets, him and Mooney getting the most of those. And he's somebody that can operate within, the first 10 yards at the line of scrimmage in a particular matchup like that. If they need to get the ball out a little bit quicker, he's a big target there. But yeah, in terms of pass DVOA, it's telling us Atlanta could be a little bit more explosive. Even though if they have to get the ball out quicker, they should be a little bit more explosive in that pass game. Seattle kind of a little bit below average, but right around average, and then Atlanta top 10 in terms of DVOA in the pass game. Now the run game is where it's at. Atlanta number 3 in run blocking and run DVOA. Seattle red is run stopping and number 19 in run DVOA. So number 25 in run stopping, 19 in run DVOA. This tell me Atlanta's going to be able to run the ball very effectively against Seattle. Pass game should also be pretty explosive. I do see now why they have Atlanta favored because I think they have the better of the two matchups. But actually, I don't know. Seattle's matchups were also pretty good up here. So could be another back and forth affair. I actually think this 3-point line's pretty accurate. I think this is one that you're going to maybe want to target where Washington, Carolina could get a little out of hand at times. I think this one could end up being a back and forth shootout affair. Both teams play very quickly here. Seattle number 2 and 3 in those pace of plays. Atlanta's actually number 3 and number 1. So this one could be a super shootout too. Two really, honestly, pretty good games here in terms of the Vegas game total. I think this one can go back and forth and actually hit the over as well. If I didn't get to the team implied totals, Atlanta is second best and Seattle ninth best there. So two really good offenses inside the top 10 on the main slate here. Probably one that you're going to want to target in fantasy land, and with so much stuff going to Washington and maybe Carolina in that matchup, this one might get a little overlooked, especially with Seattle kind of underperforming, Atlanta having so many weapons, and a lot of those, people kind of get the taste in their mouth that they're underperforming. Hey, Mooney had a big game. That's all well and sweet, but we don't really have him on the fantasy teams. We have Drake London, who is hit or miss. I mean, he's had some big games, but Pitts here or there, he's been disappointing. Bijan Robinson, he's getting fantasy points, but otherwise disappointing. There's Tyler Allgeier there. Does he narc some touchdowns? You might get a little bit lower rostered people here in this Seattle-Atlanta matchup. That looks like it could go off in this week. Alrighty, we have Detroit heading into Minnesota. This line kind of surprising here, but it's a 49.5 Vegas game total, third best on the main slate here. We have Detroit as 2.5 point road underdog, so Minnesota favored at home by 2.5 points. I thought Detroit might come in and be a little bit favored, but nope, they are giving Minnesota some respect finally, saying, hey, this is a good Detroit team. They just walloped Dallas, but they're still not favored in the Minnesota stadium here. So that gives Minnesota a 26 team implied total, which is actually the third best on the main slate here. Detroit at 23.5 is the 11th best on the main slate. Looking at Detroit's offensive pass protection, they are number 11 and number 12 in offensive pass DVOA. Minnesota number 5 in pass rush, number 1 in defensive pass DVOA. We've seen this defense really confuse the best of the best, quarterback so far in the league. Aaron Rodgers befuddled. We had Houston and CJ Stroud confused. I think this is just an interesting defense. Obviously, there's a little bit more tape here. Jared Goff doesn't do that well when he's under pressure. Certainly a savvy veteran, so he's seen his fair share of this defense here in the last few years. But we'll be curious to see how it goes this season. A lot of people getting confused. He could be one of those, and he could play pretty poorly in that regard, where if he is feeling the pressure, we could see some mistakes here, some sacks. Minnesota's defense certainly in play against Detroit, even though Detroit seems like a very good team. Now in the run game, Detroit number 1, number 2. They've been very good in that regard. Minnesota number 10 in run stopping, number 1 in run DVOA. So even though Detroit's been very good in the run game, this looks like they're going up against a defense who should otherwise match them. In these situations, like I said, studs will eat. They'll just be a little bit better than the defense across from them. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is there. Montgomery's certainly good. So don't be shocked if Detroit's not as dominant on the ground as they've otherwise been. But I think, that's going to be how they end up moving the ball. The pass game may struggle a little bit. That run game probably going to struggle a little bit more than they otherwise have so far this season against this Minnesota defense. And, looking good for Minnesota here, I guess, trying to hold that Detroit offense in check. It certainly looks like they could be able to do that this week. Now, on the Minnesota side, their offensive pass protection is red, number 24, so they're taking a lot of sacks. Defensive pass rush, though, for Detroit, 21, not generating a lot of sacks. We just saw Aiden Hutchinson out for the season. That was pretty much their sole source of pass rush, and now that's gone. I would expect Minnesota to have a little bit more time than they're otherwise used to having back there. That's good for Sam Darnold. Pass DVOA for Minnesota, number 8, Detroit, number 5. I don't know if this goes a little bit south now that Aiden Hutchinson isn't applying any pressure, but certainly based off of this matchup, it's more even keel, but we know that injury, they should have a little bit more time to pass the ball. And then in these situations, I say stud eat. And I don't know if you can get any more studly than Justin Jefferson. So in a situation like that, I expect him to have a really good game in this matchup. I think that will be who you're going to want to target from Minnesota. And then the run blocking side, Minnesota number 7, Detroit number 2. Again, we did lose Aiden Hutchinson. This could be a little bit better than it otherwise is, but currently on paper, Detroit better than Minnesota a little bit. And then the run DVOA, Detroit's been very good in the run department. Number 10, Minnesota number 20 in run DVOA. So this is telling me Minnesota probably going to struggle a little bit on the ground. I don't know if we're even going to have Aaron Jones in this matchup. We just did get news that Cam Akers, again, I'm recording this on Tuesday, Cam Akers heading over to Minnesota via trade with the Houston Texans. And based on this, doesn't look great for Detroit's offense. It's, on paper, doesn't look great for Minnesota's offense. If they're going to move the ball, they're probably going to have a little bit more time in the pass game, and they have a true stud there, and that's where the offense is going to move through. If Detroit's struggling, Minnesota maybe struggles in this 49.5 total. I think this game is going to be popular in DFS as well. They're going to view this as, Minnesota offense is good, Detroit offense is good, Detroit defense is bad, right? So a lot of people think their pass defense is bad, but this is telling me it's probably going to be a Justin Jefferson show. If they're under pressure here, they're going to have to dump the ball off, so it's going to be more Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown this week than it will be Jameson Williams. And those are probably the only people that you're ever going to want to target in DFS. I don't know if I want to target this game itself as a game stack with a bunch of Detroit and Minnesota people. I'm probably just going to get a one-off piece of hey, I'm just going to grab a Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm just going to grab Amon-Ra St. Brown or Justin Jefferson and hope that they have a big game. And that's the one piece that I'm going to get from this game. I don't think this is one, compared to the first two that we saw, which has a chance to necessarily shoot out. If it does, it's kind of going in the face of what we see here. And then pace of play, Detroit's actually kind of slow, 28 overall, but in neutral situations, 12th, and Minnesota 19th in neutral situations. So the further leading to, I think, betting the under on this Vegas game total is how you're going to want to go in this game. All right, another good football matchup here. We have Houston heading into Green Bay. Green Bay 3-point home favorites, so basically getting that standard home field bump, saying these are two evenly matched teams. The 47.5 Vegas game total, we're starting to dip down from the 50 range here. 47.5 still decent, so that 3 Vegas line gives Green Bay a 25.25 team implied total, and Houston a 22.25 team implied total. And then in terms of ranks, Green Bay 4th best and Houston 14th best on the slate. Houston side, 17th in offensive pass protection, 14th in offensive pass DVOA. Green Bay 19th in pass rush, 14th in pass DVOA. Really even here without Nico Collins. We saw Steph Diggs and Tank Dell really run the show there. We did get the tight end involved, Schultz. I think that continues in this, but studs eat. I think it's more of the Tank Dell and Steph Diggs variety here for Houston. In the pass game, it's otherwise a matchup that's nothing to write home about, but the studs eat scenario that I've been chatting about. And then run game, it's pretty close here with the run blocking, 18 for Houston, 16 for Green Bay's defense. But then run DVOA, Houston 24th. They haven't been super explosive necessarily, and Green Bay 13th on the defensive side. So, you know, if Houston's going to move the ball, it certainly looks like the pass game is the better of the two options. They certainly have studs there in the pass game, so I think that's going to have to be how they move the ball. You know, if Green Bay can put up points, Houston's going to be passing. That's going to go into their strength. Otherwise, Joe Mixon we've seen be very effective in his 2 games this season. Might be one where you're going to want to fade him a little bit. This isn't like a terrible matchup by any means, but you know, it's not as good as a couple of games that he played against some really bad defenses where he should have balled out against them. I think he had Indianapolis and then I don't know who was last week, but certainly was in line for some big games, and he produced. This isn't one of those situations where it's looking like a smash success in the run game. Now, on the Green Bay side, they've been pretty good offense. They're number 3 in pass protection, number 5 in pass DVOA. Houston, number 4 in the pass rush, and 6 in the pass DVOA. So they're a top 10 unit. These match up very well. Houston should be able to get some pressure on Green Bay, but Green Bay does have quite a few weapons. We did see Dontavian Wicks. Looks like he's going to miss a few weeks here, so we're going to get a little bit more passes to Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, and Christian Watson in this. I also have Tucker Kraft at tight end, who could get heavily involved, especially if they're under pressure. I'd expect him to get involved and Reed to be a little bit more heavily targeted in this, as he's more of their gadgety underneath slot type receiver who's going to be running some quicker routes, and I'd expect those two to end up with a few more targets, Tucker Kraft and Jaden Reed in this particular matchup. Now on the run blocking side, Green Bay 16, Houston number 5, and stopping the run, that's pretty heavily in the favor of Houston. So we expect quite a few not super successful runs from Josh Jacobs. And then that run DVOA, Houston 3, Green Bay 7. Again, this is telling me of the two matchups, Green Bay probably a little bit better here for the pass game, the run game not as good. Looks like it's almost mirror here for Houston. Pass game, Green Bay pass game, pretty even up in specific receivers that you're going to want to target. And then the run games are probably a fade to an extent. Could see Josh Jacobs with a few more targets based off of this pass protection matchup and trying to get the ball out quicker. But again, I think this is going to be pretty popular in DFS. Green Bay and Houston, two great passing offenses. I think people are going to say, hey, this one could shoot out. It certainly could, but based off of what I'm seeing here on the adjusted line play report, you're going to have to get those studs eating. They are going to have to move it through the air, but it's not necessarily a super great matchup, so don't be shocked if it ends up being, oh, we had Stroud with 247 yards and a touchdown or 2 touchdowns. It's decent. It's not killing you, but hey, it's no one's going bonkers. And then same with Green Bay, 240 yards, 2 touchdowns. Is that really getting it done for the ancillary pieces? Sure, if they catch the touchdown, you're going to be fine, but Green Bay's got a lot of weapons to catch those touchdowns. What happens if it's Dalton Schultz up here and your receivers don't score any? You run into stuff like that. I just don't see access to a ceiling unless this does shoot out, and I don't know if it's going to go that route. But more of a avoid the path or avoid the rush, and if you're going to grab a piece or two from this, I don't know if you want a game stack, you can certainly play that, but just grab a piece or two in the pass game, more focusing on Reed, Tucker Kraft, Tank Dell, and Steph Diggs. All right, we got a Super Bowl rematch here for the 5th best game on the slate. Kansas City heading into San Francisco. San Francisco 1.5 point home favorites, so they don't get the 3-point bump. They're saying Kansas City a slightly better team, but it is an away game, so it's 1.5 points here. 47 Vegas total, slightly below what we just saw, giving San Francisco a 24.25 team implied total. Kansas City at 22.75. Those are the 7th and 13th ranked team implied totals on the slate, respectively. Kansas City side, pretty even. Pass protection, 14-15. Nothing to write home about. Standard day at the office. Patrick Mahomes, very good at his job, so don't really expect anything to be weird in this matchup. DVOA aspect, Kansas City 10, San Francisco number 3. So Kansas City might not be very explosive. If they're not necessarily under duress trying to pass the ball, I think this leans more towards Travis Kelce and Justin Watson type week. Juju certainly could get involved here, but I like him a lot more in the matchups where they're probably going to have to get the ball out quicker. He's more of that underneath route guy. If you want to, you can kind of say he's taking over the Rashee Rice role, so you could be looking his way a little bit more. But I think this is a game where you can see Justin Watson have a surprise game. Otherwise, I think it's going to flow through Travis Kelce in that particular manner. The run blocking, though, for Kansas City is probably how they're going to want to move the ball. It looks to be more effective here. Number 4 and number 8 for run blocking and run DVOA. San Francisco 15 and 14, middle of the pack. So Kansas City's been very good in that department. Don't be shocked if Kareem Hunt has a pretty solid game running the ball here. Don't know what the situation is with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but if he's back, it could cut into some of that role. Post bye week, we could see Carson Steele get a little bit more involved, or we might just see Kareem Hunt get even more of the role, getting himself acclimated with the offense for 2 whole weeks here. So could go any number of ways in the run blocking, but they should be better in the run game than they were in the pass game in this matchup. Now on the San Francisco side, they're number 12 in pass protection, Kansas City 27. They're not getting after the quarterback. Brock Purdy should have time in those situations where he's got time. I do like Brandon Ayuk more in those particular matchups, so he could have a good game. I'm not super familiar with the cornerback matchups here, but Ayuk with time is usually the person who benefits. On the DVOA side, San Francisco number 2, Kansas City number 12. That's in the favor of San Francisco, so they should be explosive in their pass game as well. Now on the run blocking side, San Francisco number 2 in run blocking, so very good at getting positive yardage. Kansas City number 6 in stopping the run. That's kind of their bread and butter, is stopping the run. So number 6, and then number 2 in the run DVOA. San Francisco 18 in the run DVOA. Got some injuries there. CMC still out, and we have the backup, Jordan Mason. He had a shoulder injury. Whether or not he plays, don't know yet. Got to pay attention to his practices. If he's limited practice participant, don't know what that's going to entail, him playing or being limited in the game most likely. And you can see carries going other directions. And at that point, it might be somebody that I just avoid. It's not a very good matchup here with the run DVOA at 18 and Kansas City number 2. So I'm probably avoiding Jordan Mason. He actually hasn't been all that great for fantasy purposes in some of these last matchups. Hitting below 10 half-point PPR, despite some of these being otherwise pretty good-looking matchups for him in some of these games. He's had some blow-up games for sure, but otherwise kind of disappointing recently. And If he's limited all week, I would be comfortable sitting him and trying to find a better option this week, with Kansas City's defense being so good in that regard, and him coming off of an injury and potentially having his snaps limited, and otherwise being not as efficient fantasy-wise the last couple of weeks. So somebody that I feel should be on your fade list, Jordan Mason there. All right, next matchup, Miami heading into Indianapolis, dome game, 44 Vegas game total, 6th best on the slate, 3.5-point home favorites for Indianapolis, giving them a 23.75 team implied total. 10th best on the slate, Miami at 20.25 is the 16th best team implied total on the slate. Now it gets a little bit interesting. Pass protection for Miami, number 28, pass DVOA 31. Not very good. Some of the worst in the league. Fortunately, they're playing somebody named the Indianapolis Colts, who is also very bad. So 29th in defensive pass rush, 23rd in pass DVOA. Could Tyler Huntley in this particular matchup actually end up being good? Looking at the run blocking, Miami 31 and 29, Indianapolis 20 and 17. They're improving, but they haven't been good against the run in general. Actually worse than what this DVOA and run stopping kind of suggests it is. But the pass game seems to be where it's at. That's the better of the two matchups on paper here. Miami dealing with some running back injuries. I'm not entirely sure what that's going to look like come Sunday. Again, we're recording this on Tuesday, so pay attention to those injury reports. But I think Huntley, very sneaky in DFS. I think he could have a good game against this Indianapolis team, especially Vegas is saying that they're going to be down in this game. Don't be shocked if we see Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle actually come out here and have some pretty solid games against this Indianapolis Colts defense. On the run game, avoid Trey Sermon. I don't think he's very good, and you could see him being so bad that Tyler Goodson, who's actually looked pretty good, may see extended run in this particular game. Sorry, we're getting into the Indianapolis side, but Miami side, I said pay attention to those injuries. Not exactly a great game to be starting based off of this, but we know Indianapolis's defense has been otherwise beat up in the run game as well this season. On the Indianapolis side, number 5 in pass protection, so not taking a bunch of sacks. Miami not getting a bunch of sacks at number 24. And then the pass DVOA slightly in the favor of Indianapolis, but pretty close. 13 versus 16 on Miami's defense, telling me that they're going to have time to throw the ball. If Anthony Richardson is in there, that's good for Alec Pierce. We see him get a bunch of bombs in the game. Maybe even A.D. Mitchell gets involved in this matchup. Probably bad news for Pittman. I think he, with time, is the one that gets left out. Josh Downs kind of underneath. They try to get him the ball, but he does have deep potential as well. And I think if I'm fading anybody with Anthony Richardson in there, it's going to be Pittman out of all of those wide receivers, just because he's going to be the most expensive, and I think he's going to get one of the least amount of target shares in this game. Indianapolis running side, number 30 in run blocking, Miami 18 in stopping the run. Then Indianapolis number 13 in run DVOA, Miami 31. So this is pretty heavily in the favor of Indianapolis, saying that they should otherwise be successful. It's almost flip-flopped here, where it's saying, hey, they're probably going to get stopped behind the line of scrimmage quite a bit. And then maybe have some explosive plays. So it's either feast or famine type stuff. As I was saying, I don't think Trey Sermon's been good. He might be the famine part of the running. And then, hey, once Tyler Goodson gets the ball, he might be the feast part over here in the run DVOA. So kind of a Mr. Jekyll and Dr. Hyde, whatever, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type situation here, where, woof, they look really bad, and then all of a sudden they bust off a long, decent one. But looking like the pass game is the best bet for Indianapolis to move the ball. They probably, I don't know, this run game's a little bit wonky. And Miami should be able to be fairly effective passing the ball, I think, in this matchup. But otherwise, kind of an interesting game, one that I'm, maybe going to get a piece of this Miami pass attack and call it good. Maybe an Alec Pierce in there, something like that. Otherwise, I'm probably avoiding most of this matchup, even if it's number 6 on the slate. All right, 7th best game on the slate. We have Vegas going into Los Angeles. It's a 43.5 Vegas game total, starting to get into the bad range here. It's a 7-point home favorite for the Rams, actually giving them a 25.25 team implied total. Fourth best on the slate there for the Rams. Could be shocking to some people. And then the Raiders at 18.25 is the 19th best on the slate. I don't know how much this Vegas line is going to move. This is as of about 5 p.m. Central Time. On Tuesday, we did get word that Davante Adams this afternoon, probably about 3 or 4 hours before this line, was traded to the Jets. So Las Vegas down that weapon. I don't know if they were expecting him to play or not, but we could see this line move significantly after this, especially if we get Cooper Kupp. Sounded like he practiced. So I think this is why we have the Rams with such a high total. Vegas, otherwise not a very good team. And then Cooper Kupp could be coming back for the Rams. And then Vegas is losing Davante Adams. Keep an eye out for all of that. It's Tuesday as I record this. If you're watching the whole video, you're probably getting sick of me saying that. But certainly want to stress that if this is the only matchup that you're watching. It was recorded on Tuesday. Vegas, 21 in offensive pass protection. Rams, number 17, pretty even there. And then 27 in pass DVOA, number 30 in pass DVOA for Rams defense. Pretty even up matchup, I say in those situations. Studs eat. Brock Bowers is a stud. He probably will eat in this particular matchup. And then just with the lack of weapons, it's probably going to be the Brock Bowers in Jacoby Myers show. And that's how they're going to move the ball in the air, is through those two. The run game, Vegas, very bad, 32 and 32. Literally cannot get worse than that. Rams, fortunately for them, though, are 26th and 30th. So the Raiders might actually find the run game a little bit easier than they're otherwise used to in this matchup. And then pretty even up here in the pass attack. We might see Vegas actually be able to move the ball despite losing Davante Adams this week. And then the Rams side, number 26 in offensive pass protection, Vegas 18, slight favor there for Vegas. And then pass DVOA is a little bit closer. Vegas in the red at 24, the Rams at 22. Kind of even up. If you got studs, they will eat in this. I think if Cooper Kupp comes back, especially with them being under pressure a little bit, we could see Kupp with another 20-target game against this Raiders team. That is if they need to throw the ball. It certainly looks like Vegas can move the ball in this defense, so it's certainly in play. In terms of running the ball, though, Rams 13 and 11, Vegas 13 and 28 in stopping the run. So should be, in terms of positive, negative, we should see quite a few, 3 to 5 yard runs in this particular matchup. And then some explosive plays. So Rams number 11 in DVOA, Vegas on defense 28th in the run DVOA. Might see Kyren Williams with a pretty solid game, kind of run away with this. It does certainly look like the better of the two matchups between run game and pass game. I think Kyren Williams is certainly in play, and Cooper Kupp would be in play here. Based off of this, I mean, doesn't look like the Rams are going to be great. The 7-point spread, don't be shocked if Vegas is, within that 7 points for this particular game, and that they do cover that 7-point spread. I think they can keep that close enough with this Rams team based off of what I'm seeing here. But there are certainly intriguing pieces like Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, Cooper Kupp if he plays, and Kyren Williams in this that otherwise might be, some sneaky plays in a lower Vegas game total. Next game on the slate, we have Philadelphia heading into New York Giants. The Eagles are 3-point road favorites here. It's a 43 Vegas game total, not super great. Again, 8th best on the slate with that 3-point Vegas line that gives Philadelphia a 23-point team implied total. 12th best on the slate out of 22. And then Giants, the 20-point team implied total is 17th on the slate. Pass protection for Philadelphia, number 25. The Giants, number 1 in defensive pass rush. Expect Jalen Hurts to be under pressure. He's probably going to have quite a few more rush attempts in this game just because he's going to be scrambling out of the pocket. I don't know what his rush total is in terms of the betting market, but if there's anything like a 4.5 line, I am hitting the over on that. I wouldn't be shocked to see him with 6 or 7 rush attempts in this. If the line's at 5.5, 6.5, I'm going to get a little bit more nervous, but I think that's right in line. 6 to 7 rush attempts for him in this particular matchup. Does get a lot of tush pushes and all that when they get on fourth down, which, rack up too. So I don't know what his line's put at, but certainly 6 or 7 scrambles based off of this within play. The run blocking side, Philadelphia 22, offensive run DVOA number 5. Giants actually a little bit better in the run blocking, so 14, and then run DVOA number 9. They're not like super great matchups for either the defense or the offense here. Barkley is certainly a stud, so he can overcome a matchup like this. The pass game doesn't look super great, but the DVOA 16 versus 22, we could see that improve. Obviously, we did have 2 wide receivers, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, out for a while. Could have affected some of these numbers. Maybe Philadelphia is a little bit better than this in the pass game, but if they're under pressure, I don't think that necessarily favors Devonta Smith. I think that's going to be more A.J. Brown, but they're certainly both capable of getting open in the intermediate and underneath realm in a matchup like this. Could just mean more dump-offs to Barkley and Grant Calcaterra. We did see Dallas Goedert get injured last week. I don't know if he's going to play this week. Again, recording on a Tuesday, so the injury thing is something to watch out for. But Grant Calcaterra could find himself with quite a few dump-offs in a matchup like this as well. Just not looking super great for Philly. They should be okay in the pass game. They should be okay in the run game, but just a weird one where you can't really decipher, too much from what's going on in this. Now, on the Giants side, they're 6th in offensive pass protection, so surprisingly not taking a ton of sacks. Philadelphia 25th in the pass rush, so not getting a lot of sacks. And then in the pass DVOA, Giants 20, Philadelphia 26. Watch out for Malik Neighbors. As of last week, as far as I know, he was in the same spot in the concussion protocol. Hopefully for his sake, that advances quickly this week and he's able to get in some practices and no ill effects from that. If he plays, this is a situation where I think he would eat. They're going to have time to throw the ball for the Giants, and then Philadelphia is pretty poor here, so Giants might actually be more effective in this pass game than they otherwise are used to. Even if Neighbors is there, Slayton I think is in play. If Neighbors isn't there, I do like Slayton still. I think he could have a good game against Philadelphia in this matchup. And then the run game's actually, a neutral situation. Giants 26-23, Philly 28-23, so really even. If Tyrone Tracy plays, I don't mind him in a matchup like this either, being successful on a play-by-play basis. So quite a few people that you can target here from the Giants that are a little bit sneakier. Singletary comes back. He could also be decent. I just don't know. That muddles up that backfield a little bit, and I would be a little less likely to pick a running back to sit in any sort of starting lineup for me in any fantasy format. All right, next game, battle of who wore the orange the best, either Cincinnati or Cleveland. It's a 42 Vegas game total, 9th best on the slate. 6.5-point road favorites for Cincinnati. Wow. That's a 24.25 team implied total for Cincinnati. Cleveland, 17.75 for their team implied total. Respectively, that is 7th and 21st best on the main slate. So Cleveland, one of the worst there. Offensive pass protection for Cincinnati, number 19. Cleveland 13, so slight favor there of Cleveland. I'd expect them to be able to get some pressure on Burrow and need him to either scramble or get out of the pocket. I would expect that a little bit in this game. But pass DVOA number 6 for Cincinnati, number 20 for Cleveland. Pretty heavily in the favor here of Cincinnati's pass game. Expect them to be explosive, even if they do have to get the ball out a little bit quicker. And then the run blocking, Cincinnati number 8, defensive run DVOA number 15, pretty well matched there by Cleveland, number 8 in stopping the run and 20 in run DVOA, so slightly in the favor of the DVOA aspect here for Cincinnati's run game, but really telling me they're going to have a better matchup in the pass game, passing the ball than running it, but otherwise offense might not be terribly great in this particular matchup. On the Cleveland side, we have 32 in offensive pass protection, 32 in pass DVOA. Been absolutely atrocious. Just saw a tweet, I don't remember who from, but it was today talking about out of 789 teams in the last 20 years, all of those teams who have played games through 5 weeks or 6 weeks of play, Cleveland, I think they're just going through all of their ranks, especially in the pass game, and I think the best one was like 777th out of 789 teams. So really, really, really historically bad offense, just absolutely atrocious. They do play Cincinnati, who's 30th in defensive pass rush and 19th in pass DVOA. I've been saying for like 4 weeks here, Cleveland in good matchup, they should do well. And it has burned us every single time. They have not been good. I mean, this is another scenario where they should otherwise be better than they have been. But is that the 5th time I say it? And the 5th time that they don't do well. Certainly looks that way, but run blocking, they're 24th and 30th. Cincinnati 19 and 22nd. So of the two matchups, it certainly looks like maybe the pass game has a little bit more time to throw the ball than they're used to. They just traded away Amari Cooper, so going to get a little bit more targets funneling over to Njoku and Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore. I think those are all kind of tier 2, tier 3 type of, skill set players. I don't know. It's just going to be ugly here for Cleveland. The run game, we got Ford that went off the field with an injury. Who knows who's playing anyway in Cleveland when everybody's healthy. So it's just a weird offense. I don't know how they're going to play in this game, but I think it's just that all hands away from it. And finally, when I say that, they're going to do well, right? So I don't know. Stay away. Choose your own risk, I guess, if you want to go that route. But Cincinnati, I think, not going to do very well. I don't think Cleveland's going to do very well in offense. Cincinnati kind of hitting their stride, but don't be shocked if this 42 Vegas game total ends up hitting the under. Cincinnati could get thwarted by Cleveland's defense at Cleveland, and then Cleveland just might end up still being bad. Unfortunate. All right, 10th best out of 11 games on the main slate. We have Tennessee heading into Buffalo. Despite Buffalo being the 6th best team implied total on the slate, this is the 10th best in game total. So the 41.5 Vegas game total and an 8.5 Vegas line gives Buffalo a 25 team implied total, which I said is 6th best. Tennessee the worst in the main slate though, 16.5 for their game total. That's 22nd out of 22, not good. Tennessee, number 29 in offensive pass protection, taking lots of sacks. 30th in pass DVOA, not turning the ball over, not getting what they should, and otherwise other situations. Buffalo sitting in above average territory in terms of defensive pass rush and defensive pass DVOA. So I would expect the offensive pass game here for Tennessee to struggle. We've seen them struggle pretty much all year. It's not going to be a good game for Will Levis here. Unfortunately for them, it doesn't get much better in the run game. They're 20th and 14 in the run categories, while Buffalo's defense is 7th and 8th. To be honest, the run game does look like the better of the two options, and it's still a poor option in this scenario. I can see why Tennessee has the lowest Vegas game total. This does not look like a good situation. Pollard should have the backfield to himself potentially in this, and that's probably the only viable piece from Tennessee that you can get. You may see some dump offs, if they're under pressure, but this is otherwise, I think Tennessee is just going to look really bad in this particular matchup. It could be so bad that they start looking at Levis just after last game. I don't know. I think he's playing already. He just makes some boneheaded moves, but this one I think is it's not going to be a good one for him. On the Buffalo side, number 2 in pass protection, Tennessee 16. Buffalo 3 in offensive pass DVOA, Tennessee 10. Tennessee's defense has been pretty good, so you might see them stifle Buffalo here, but Buffalo did just trade for Amari Cooper, so they'll have him this week to help play. That should help their offensive pass game improve, maybe from number 3 to the top 1, but that'll be curious to see how that works. It certainly looks like the better of the two matchups for Buffalo to be passing it versus running. So Tennessee number 1 and number 6 in the run categories on defense. Buffalo number 11 in run blocking and number 6 in run DVOA. Don't know what James Cook's story is going to be with his toe. Does he sit out another week? Doesn't seem like it, but he probably is back. But Ray Davis looked good. Maybe they don't give him as much run because his toe is hurt, so it's an even split for this week while they kind of rest James Cook. Kind of depends on how that goes. So that's probably an avoid in DFS for me. Start at your own risk for James Cook in any of your fantasy leagues. If you're in a deeper league and you have to, I don't think it's the end of the world, but see if you can get some other options. Buffalo probably going to move the ball through the air. Don't be shocked if Josh Allen has a really big game here and they just lean on him to do all of the heavy lifting in this matchup while their run game struggles a little bit. In a situation like this where it's not a super great matchup in the pass game, the run game is also not super great. I'm not going to say that there's an upset because Tennessee looks really bad, but Tyler Bass, if there's not a win problem in Buffalo in this game, he might be one of those that gets like 5 or 6 field goals in a matchup like this. Just be aware of that. If you have them, I would keep them for this matchup. And then actually, FanDuel does use the Sunday Night Football for their main slates. That is the worst one on the main slate. We have the the New York Jets heading into Pittsburgh. And they're actually 1.5 point home favorites. Expect this line to change. Again, recording this on a Tuesday. Come Sunday Night Football, this line is almost assuredly going to be more heavily favored for the Jets. Expect the game total maybe to go up a little bit, as well as Devontae Adams is now in New York to play in this particular matchup with Aaron Rodgers. So I'd expect this line to have some pretty decent change between now and Sunday. So 38 Vegas total is the worst on the main slate. As I said, 1.5 point favorites for the Jets on the road. That gives them a 19.75 team implied total, in Pittsburgh an 18.25 team implied total. Those are 18th and 19th on the slate out of 22. So as you can imagine, worst game on the slate. There's 22 teams. New York Jets is favored in this, and they're only the 18th best score in the matchup. So probably a huge avoid, right? Well, we'll see. What does the adjusted line play report say? Pretty even in the pass game. Jets 13 and 17. Pittsburgh 12 and 15. Really close. Studs eating those scenarios. I think we got 2 of them there, and the Jets now with Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. So watch out for that. They might hum in this. Pittsburgh, kind of middle of the pack. They started off hot against Atlanta and then have been kind of slowly fading towards the middle of the pack as we've moved on from there. The run blocking, Jets have been terrible, 29 and 28. Pittsburgh number 4, number 5. Just Breece Hall looking like another bad matchup here. I know he got it done in PPR leagues with some of his yardage last night. So they played last night and against Buffalo, and he had an all right game, but it was not all wheels up as we've expected him at the beginning of the season when we drafted him, in the first round. So this is going to be another game where it looks like he's going to struggle. When are those games going to stop? I don't know, but this is just another one where it doesn't look like he's going to do well, which is going to force more on the pass attack and Aaron Rodgers, and I think that's going to be how they move the ball. Pittsburgh side, number 27 in pass protection. The Jets, number 3 in the pass rush. Expect a lot of pressure here from the Jets getting after the quarterback. Does sound like they're going to give Russell Wilson the start in this particular matchup for Pittsburgh. So expect him in there, and maybe they take a few less sacks with him in versus Justin Fields. So Justin Fields does take a lot of sacks. Russell Wilson also took a lot of sacks when he was in his younger days. So wouldn't be shocked to see him take a few extra in this. But pass DVOA, Jets number 11, Pittsburgh 19, also in the favor of the Jets. I'd expect Pittsburgh to struggle in the pass game department. Pat Freiermuth maybe sees a few more receptions. We see some go Jaylen Warren. We see some go to Najee Harris. And I think the rest of the pass catchers there struggle outside the tight ends and the running backs. On the run game, though, it looks a little bit better. Pittsburgh number 23 and number 22 in the run categories. Those are, knocking on the door of red, if not red. Jets, though, number 29 and 25. So Pittsburgh might actually find it a little bit easier to run the ball in this situation. So expect Najee and Jaylen Warren to get a little bit involved in that and be kind of how they move the ball, especially if it's going to be on the ground. So this is an island game matchup too. I would be attacking the Jets in terms of their pass attack. And then on the Pittsburgh side, those running backs I think are in play. Those are all going to be expensive players on this particular matchup. So just keep that in mind. But Pittsburgh kicker could be in play. The Jets with an even matchup in the pass game and then an otherwise poor run game could be in line for some field goals as well. So it's a low Vegas game total, and that's when I start looking at the defenses and the kickers. Jets defense is certainly in play here as well. All right, and we got 2 Monday Night Football games, so we're going to kind of treat it as its own mini slate. We're going to go into the first game on the slate, Baltimore at Tampa Bay, which is number 1 on the slate, and then we got the Chargers and Arizona at number 2. So Baltimore, Tampa Bay at 47.5 for their Vegas game total. Pretty healthy there. It's a 3.5 point favorite for Baltimore on the road. So heading into Tampa Bay as 3.5 point favorites. So number 1 team implied total for Baltimore at 25.5 on this Monday night slate. Tampa Bay at 22 points is the 3rd best. So the other favorite over there, I believe, was the Chargers. It is number 2, I'm assuming. Baltimore, number 4 in offensive pass protection. Tampa Bay, 14th in defensive pass rush. And then Baltimore, number 1 in pass DVOA. Tampa Bay, number 9 in the defensive pass DVOA. Kind of shocked here. I think a lot of people were passing on Tampa Bay at will. We even saw the Saints there with Spencer Rattler in his first action have a pretty solid game against them. Don't be shocked if Baltimore does have a good pass game against this Tampa Bay defense, despite what the pass DVOA says here. I think Baltimore can pass on them. They should have time to throw the ball. Zay Flowers is the biggest beneficiary there. And then we've seen Bateman get involved and be successful. Tight ends have been getting involved and being successful. It's just unfortunately not the same one all the time. Keep an eye out on that. But run game-wise, it does look like the better option on paper. So Baltimore number 6 and number 1 in the run blocking and run DVOA, and Tampa Bay 11 in both of those categories. So that looks perhaps like the potential better of the matchup, a number 1 versus a number 11 in the run DVOA. But in general, it just looks like Baltimore's offense is a little bit better than Tampa Bay's defense, and they should be able to move the ball. On the Tampa Bay side, 23 in offensive pass protection, Baltimore number 9 in the pass rush. We should see them be able to get after Baker. He's been running like a dude possessed, so that could continue in this matchup against Baltimore. Don't be shocked to see some scrambles from him. The pass DVOA for Tampa Bay is inside the top 10 at number 9. Baltimore 18th in the defensive pass DVOA. So this is suggestive that Tampa Bay should be able to pass the ball, but they're going to have to get it out quickly. This is going to favor Chris Godwin and dumping it off to the tight end, Cade Otton, and the running back. So don't be shocked if they get a little bit more heavy usage and we see, unfortunately, Mike Evans take a back seat in this. But the pass DVOA is such that we could see Evans even with a pretty solid game. I just think they're going to have to get the ball out a little bit quicker there in Tampa Bay in this matchup. And then the run game, Baltimore very good at stopping the run, number 3 and number 4. Tampa Bay all the way up at number 9 and number 10 now in the offensive run blocking. I don't know if that's all a factor of last week, but it does sound like we're going to have a 3-headed monster running back room there once Rachaad White gets back. That's what Todd Bowles sounds like he said he's interested in doing. So, it looks like the pass game here for Tampa Bay. Baltimore's offense otherwise should be pretty good. I'd expect them to pull out this victory. If you're playing an island game matchup specifically for this, it's going to be tough sledding to find a Tampa Bay running back you're interested in. So it's a decent Vegas total. You're probably going to have to find maybe a one-off scenario in Baltimore's pass game. Hopefully somebody in Tampa Bay's pass game that does well. Otherwise, get some of those kickers involved, or Baltimore defense that maybe gets some sacks on Baker Mayfield and has him with the bad game. But yeah, not one that I feel super comfortable going in and saying, hey, absolutely, this is how you have to attack this game. And I think that's fine to say. It's not showing us the answers necessarily to who would be great plays with their personnel and what numbers we're seeing here. And if you've been it this far, final game out of all of the games in week 7. It's going to be a monster episode here. But this is Los Angeles Chargers heading into Arizona. They are 2.5-point road favorites, so 2 road favorites here. It's a 44 Vegas game total, which gives the Chargers a 23.25 team implied total. Arizona at 20.75, second and fourth best on this Monday night slate. On the Chargers side, number 22 in offensive pass protection, number 21 in offensive pass DVOA, so below average there. Fortunately for them, Arizona is red at 23 and 28. Expect the Chargers to have a little bit more time than they're used to, and expect them to be a little bit more explosive than they're used to. So Lab McConkey, I think, should have a good game. Quentin Johnston also on the board for being able to have a good game in this matchup. Palmer does run routes there. He's always an option as well. It's an island game, so if you're playing this one specifically, it does look like Herbert should be fine along with some of his pass catchers. On the run blocking side, the Chargers 28 in run blocking, which isn't great. Arizona, though, number 24. So they might find it a little bit easier than they have so far this year to be successful on a play-in, play-out basis. And then run DVOA 16, Arizona 15, nothing to write home about. Standard day at the office. But the Chargers in general might find it a little bit easier than they're used to move the ball on the ground. It's not the great matchup, but looks like the pass game will be how they move it the best. The run game should also be okay. Dobbins is the one that you're going to want there from the Chargers on that side. Arizona, number 8 in pass protection. Chargers, number 10. Arizona used to not taking sacks, but they should be getting a little bit of pressure here from that Chargers front. So expect that to happen. That leads to Kyler Murray run attempts. Arizona in the pass DVOA number 15. They could be without Marvin Harrison Jr., which leaves it up to Greg Dortch and Michael Wilson to fill in those gaps. I think so. That 15 might look a little bit worse on paper, or worse in reality than it is on paper. And the Chargers number 4 in pass DVOA. So I expect the pass game to struggle here for Arizona, not be very good. Michael Wilson, certainly I think the best target in my eyes for this in terms of the wide receivers. But McBride, if they're trying to get the ball out quickly on that front, is probably going to be the biggest beneficiary of this particular game scenario, where it looks like Chargers should be able to score some points. McBride, wouldn't be shocked to see him hit double-digit targets in this matchup. Run game, Arizona 19, Chargers 21 in stopping the run. So on a play-by-play basis, maybe they're successful there, but we did see James Connerly with injury last week. Could be a weird backfield. Just pay attention to the injuries. Once again, this is being recorded on Tuesday. By the time Sunday rolls around, could be a lot different story than what we have right now. Run DVOA for the Chargers, though, top 10 at number 7 and Arizona 21st. So run game doesn't look great. Pass game doesn't look like it's going to be great for Arizona. I think the Chargers take this. I think they can even cover that 2.5-point spread, to be honest. Wouldn't be shocked to see, based off of this, that J.K. Dobbins ends up with a bunch of rush attempts as well. Kamani Vidal, I think, is involved now. He's certainly somebody in an island game matchup that you can get in there. If he scores a touchdown, you're looking at a pretty good payout on that particular team. All right, we made it through all the games. Sorry I had to do all of this. So we hit the Thursday night theory. Go back to the beginning of this video if you didn't catch that. So that went into depth in terms of all of the options that we go through. A little learning session for you guys so you can kind of decipher these numbers on your own, especially in a situation like this where it's Tuesday and I might not be able to help you out come the weekend with some of these things. So all of this information coming out on Tuesday. I got the waiver wire already out on Twitter. We recorded the Thursday night theory about an hour and a half ago as of real time from when this voice is coming out. So due to video editing, obviously we're not going to see an hour and a half long in between those two things. But yeah, it was a mega episode here. I'm glad to get this out for you guys. The reason I actually attempted to do this, a lot of times I'll just take the week off from the content and just post the original stuff Tuesday on Twitter and leave it at that. But we're getting this video recorded. I got some time today before I have to leave tomorrow, and wanted to get it out to you because I appreciate you guys and I want you to win money. And that's what we're here to do, is give you the answers to the test so you can go out there and win some money together with the rest of those folks getting the same info. So let's go do that. Use this information. Let's go out there, win some money together. Peace, folks. Have a good one. Bye.